I never used to believe in the kind of things people whisper about in the dark. Shadows moving when no one's there, voices calling your name when you're alone. Until one night, in the dorm room I shared with Weston, I realized some things aren't just stories. Some things are waiting for you, awake or asleep. I remember this story clearly, though I've never told it aloud. Whenever I do think about it, my chest tightens and my skin crawls. It began during my first year at a boarding school in the suburbs, starting 8th grade. I was placed in a shared dorm room with a kid named Weston. At first, we barely spoke. We were just two kids thrown together in a room with 2 beds, 2 desks, and a tiny closet. Over time, I noticed things about him that didn't make sense, things that made me feel uneasy. One day, Weston handed me a small folded piece of paper. He said it was a list of things I wasn't allowed to bring into the room. I thought it was a joke. I couldn't have been more wrong. The items were random and strange. Frogs, salt, matches, certain books, frogs and salt, for God's sake. I didn't even know how to respond. I couldn't imagine bringing a frog into the dorm. And salt? I had no idea what that could possibly mean. It didn't stop there. Weston muttered to himself, constantly, especially at night. Sometimes it sounded like he was talking to someone in the room who wasn't there. I would lie awake in bed, pretending to sleep while he whispered things under his breath, his eyes darting around as if he could see something invisible. The muttering made my stomach twist into knots. I wanted to leave, but I had nowhere else to go. Then there was his notebook. I didn't know it at the time, but it would become the source of my deepest fear. One day, when Weston left the room, curiosity got the better of me. I slid my hand under his mattress and pulled out the small notebook. Most of the pages were blank, but a few held a list of names, students from our school. My heart froze when I found my own name listed near the end. Not crossed out, still listed. I couldn't explain why, but I felt a growing sense of dread. Weston was not just socially awkward. He was different, dangerous in ways I didn't understand. I started spending more time in other dorm rooms, avoiding ours as much as possible. But one night, that fear became very real. I woke up suddenly, drawn by a strange feeling. The room was pitch black, my eyes adjusting slowly. Weston wasn't whispering. He was standing at the foot of my bed, smiling. Not just smiling casually, a smile that made my stomach drop. His hands were slightly raised as if preparing to do something, but he froze there. I screamed, and he didn't flinch. When I demanded an explanation, he said I'd been talking in my sleep. That was it. That was all. I was shaking, confused, terrified, and yet somehow trapped in that small dorm room with him. The fear only escalated in the coming days. One night, I came back to the dorm to find a small garden snake coiled on my bed. Weston sat at his desk, expression blank. "It's just a prank," he said, but the unease inside me wouldn't go away. The snake slithered willingly into a jar he opened, like it had known him all along. Then came a night that broke me completely. I woke in sleep paralysis, unable to move. A dark, pulsing mass hovered above the ceiling. A claw emerged, scraping the bed frame, reaching for me. It recoiled, then flew across the room, ransacking our things before crashing through the window and vanishing. My eyes snapped open. The window was shattered. The bed frame bore deep scratches exactly where the claw had struck in my vision. Weston was asleep, completely unaware. The RA arrived, due to the screaming. Weston accused me of going through his things, yelling in a language I didn't understand. The room was a mess. The glass glinted on the floor, the bed frame scarred. And just like that, my reality had fractured. The administration moved me to another room the next morning, and Weston was gone. His belongings vanished. Nobody explained what happened. Even now, thinking back, my heart races. The broken window, the claw marks, the ransacked room, everything was real. And yet, Weston, or something else, I'll never know, but I'll never forget. When I was little, my parents would send me to my grandparents' farm in Pennsylvania for 2 weeks every summer. It wasn't a big farm, really just 40 acres of mostly woods with a modest farmhouse in the middle. But as a kid, it felt like another world. The first time I went there, I was maybe 7, and it felt magical. The smell of fresh hay, the clucking of chickens, the creaking of the old wooden floorboards. The house had 3 floors, though the top floor was just a finished attic room that had once belonged to my dad. That was where I slept during my visits. The ceiling slanted down on both sides, and one window overlooked the backyard, fading into the dense woods beyond. My grandparents went to bed early, usually by 9, so I would stay awake in my room reading or play on my Game Boy. It was quiet, but the quiet felt alive in a way I didn't understand. The first summer went by uneventfully, but the second summer, when I was 9, I started noticing strange things. On one of the first nights, I was reading in bed when I heard soft footsteps on the attic stairs. They weren't heavy, more like someone tiptoeing. The door handle turned slightly, and the door creaked open about 6 inches. I froze, thinking it was my grandma coming to check on me. But no one appeared. The footsteps didn't retreat. Nothing moved. I eventually convinced myself it was my imagination. 3 nights later, something more disturbing happened. I woke to my bed shaking slightly. I thought I was dreaming until I saw a dark figure standing at the foot of my bed. I couldn't make out details, just a shadowy shape, but the feeling it gave me was unmistakable. I kept my eyes closed, counting silently, hoping it would go away. When I opened them, it was gone. I told myself it had been a nightmare. The next morning, my closet door was wide open. I remembered closing it the night before. My stomach dropped. I wondered if my grandma had come into the room while I slept. But if she had, why leave the closet open? Why leave no sign of her presence at all? Throughout the week, more incidents occurred. Soft footsteps on the stairs. The faint outline of someone watching me from the doorway. The feeling of being touched lightly on my arm while awake, only to turn and find nothing there. I mentioned it to my grandpa. He laughed and said the house was old, and old houses make noises. He mentioned raccoons occasionally getting into the walls. I didn't argue, but the unease lingered. By the end of my stay, I was relieved to go home, but I couldn't shake the memory of the dark figure. When my cousin Francisco came the next month, I assumed he had it easier than I did. He was a few years older, and I thought maybe his mind could rationalize the strange events better than mine. I was wrong. When I finally asked him about his summer, he hesitated. Then he told me something that made my blood run cold. "That thing used to touch me," he said. My heart skipped a beat. He described the same dark figure I had seen, standing at the foot of his bed, but it didn't just watch him. It would sit on his mattress, press rough fingers against his face, sometimes hold his wrist. He would lie there, eyes shut, hoping if he didn't move, it would leave him alone. I couldn't believe it. We had been in the same house, experiencing the same phenomenon, and nobody else had noticed. I asked him why he hadn't told anyone. He said his mom didn't believe him and actually got angry when he complained. So he stopped. The fear that had been a whisper in my mind for weeks became a roaring certainty. Something in that house wasn't human, and it didn't want us to know it existed. I began sleeping earlier, hoping to avoid waking hours where it might appear. Still, the attic room held a tension that I couldn't shake, a sense of eyes watching from corners of the ceiling from the shadowy edges of the room. As years passed, the farm visits continued, and the same incidents occurred each summer. I would hear scratching at the floorboards, feel sudden chills, shadows moving just beyond the corner of my vision. Francisco corroborated similar events every time he came. We both knew it wasn't our imagination. When our grandparents passed away while I was in college, the farm was empty, but the memories haunted me. The attic window, the shadow at the foot of my bed, the feeling of rough, scratchy fingers brushing against skin that was supposed to be alone, all of it stayed. Even now, I avoid old farmhouses. Avoid attics. Avoid sleeping alone. Because I know some things don't leave, even when the place is empty. Some things follow you home. When I was 9 years old, my family lived in a narrow townhouse squeezed between 2 identical buildings. My bedroom was on the 3rd floor, and the window there looked directly into the house behind ours, maybe 20 feet away. The houses were so close that you could see straight into the rooms across from you. For a long time, there was never anyone in that window. Occasionally, I would peek over and see an empty room, furniture covered with dust sheets, blinds half closed. But one day that changed. I saw her, a girl, probably my age, with dark hair tied in a ponytail. She was wearing a yellow sweater. She waved at me, and I waved back. Then, as quickly as she appeared, she stepped out of view. I thought it was a fluke. But the next day, she was there again at exactly the same time. And then the next day, and the next. We developed a strange routine. I would wave, she would wave back. We played silent games through the window. She would hold up drawings, and I would guess what they were. I showed her my homework, and she gave me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Some days I would open my window to talk, but she never opened hers. Just a smile and a pointed finger to her ear, as if she couldn't hear me. I was curious and asked my mom about the girl. She told me the previous occupants, the Murphys, were an older couple with no kids. I mentioned my new friend, and she suggested maybe it was a visiting granddaughter. That seemed reasonable, though it made me a little sad. I worried she would disappear one day. Weeks passed. She was always there at 3:30, always in the same yellow sweater. But then something changed. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke to tapping at my window. The sound made my skin crawl. I got up and looked. The girl was there, but not smiling. Her hands pressed against the glass, her mouth moving frantically. I couldn't hear her, but her lips spelled one word: help. Fear rooted me to the spot. I backed away slowly, but my curiosity, or maybe my need to understand, kept me watching. Then I noticed a dark stain on her sweater, near her shoulder. I wanted to cry, scream, run, everything, but I couldn't do anything. She stepped out of view again, leaving me trembling. The next day, she didn't appear, or the day after. I started to wonder if I had imagined it. But on the fourth night, the tapping returned. This time, she pressed both hands to the glass, begging silently. I realized she wasn't a child playing a game. Something was wrong. Something had happened to her. I told my parents, but they dismissed it. Imaginary friends, they said. Don't worry about it. I tried to understand. I couldn't. It didn't make sense. Why would they forbid me from even looking out the window after school? Why had she appeared at night? A few weeks later, after the girl disappeared entirely, I climbed the back fence and asked Mrs. Murphy in the garden about her. She stopped watering her plants, her smile fading. She asked how long I had been seeing the girl. I described her, the yellow sweater, the ponytail, the way she never opened her window. Mrs. Murphy's expression went blank, almost haunted. That's Jenna, she said finally. My heart sank. She was hit by a car right in front of this house, wearing that sweater. 11 years old. The family moved out afterward. We tried to use that room, but things kept happening. We sealed it. I felt a cold chill run through my body. The girl I had been talking to, playing silent games with, was dead. And somehow, she had reached out to me across the barrier between life and whatever came after. I moved houses a year later. I never looked out a window the same way again. Even now, when I pass a townhouse with windows facing other buildings, I feel the same unease I felt back then. The memory of her, Jenna, in the yellow sweater, pressing her hands against the glass, never leaves. Sometimes I dream about her. She's smiling again, but not like before. Not playful. There's something urgent in her eyes, and though I wake up sweating, I know she's still there, still watching. And I know, in some way, she'll never leave.